I'm Molly Kimball. Welcome to Fueled, a wellness and nutrition podcast. I'm a registered dietitian and nutrition journalist with a passion to help people live their strongest, healthiest life possible. In my weekly TV segments and columns, there's a limited amount of time and space to cover everything, but there's so much more to share. This podcast is my opportunity to dive deeper into the topics you want to know about. This week's podcast is a top 10 of sorts, 10 of my top recommendations for plant-based foods, or really products to help make it easy to transition to more of a plant-based diet. Now, these are just 10 of my current favorites. There are so many more. So as you're hearing this, if I'm not saying some of your favorites, let me know. We'll be covering more and more of this coming up. But following up on last week's episode, so our last episode of Fueled Wellness and Nutrition, we covered the do's and don'ts of a plant-based diet, essentially how to make the most of a plant-forward diet. 3 key things to keep in mind. Number 1, scanning that label for the not-so-great stuff. Think artificial sweeteners, food dyes, added sugar, preservatives. If it has that stuff in there, doesn't matter if it's plant-based or vegan, it may not be so great for us. Number 2, does it contain actual plants? And if so, which plants? And then number 3, upgrade your plants if necessary. And since last week's podcast, I've heard from a lot of you that you would like to dial back your intake of animal products. And in turn, this naturally means incorporating more plant-based products into your diet. But there's certain areas that are just really common sticking points for a lot of us. These shared pain points that we have when it comes to giving up certain animal-based products that we truly feel are like integral to our daily routine. For example, things like the half and half or the cream that you use in your coffee, butter, cheese, yogurt. These are all core elements of many diets and many really nutritious diets, and giving them up can feel like a really tremendous challenge, if not almost impossible. So I feel you. I know exactly where you're coming from. I felt the same way. I love these, it's got to be good coffee with like the right amount of the right creamer. And I like good cheese, and I like certain yogurts and, sheep milk yogurt or the Greek yogurt. So I get it. There's certain things that we just feel like these are our favorites. And while we may be looking to dial back on animal fats or animal products for whatever reason, it could be that we simply want to incorporate more plant-centric foods, or we might be looking to dial back animal-based saturated fat, or simply consume fewer animal products in general. It could be cholesterol issues that we're trying to address. It could be reversal of heart disease for some. There's a full spectrum of reasons for someone to say, you know what? Either I want to give up animal products and switch to plant-based foods entirely, or the other end of the spectrum, you know what? I'm just going to kind of nudge them back a little bit, those animal products, and add in just a little bit more plant-based products. So to help ease that transition, here are 10 of my current favorites that help to make it easy to transition to a more plant-heavy diet. So I'm including the specific brands of these and where to find them when relevant. I also want to note that none of these products are sponsors of this podcast. I'm not compensated for recommending any of these brands. These are just some of my personal tried and true products. They're things that friends, clients, family have tried and love. And so again, just using these to help jumpstart that transition to a more plant-forward diet. So for starters, the one that is most near and dear to my heart is coffee creamer. So plant-based options for half and half. So here's the thing. For years, if we didn't want like a half and half in our coffee, there's non-dairy creamers, but a lot of the non-dairy liquid creamers are things like corn syrup solids, palm oils, and just kind of just some weird stuff in there that, yeah, it may not be dairy, but it's also not stuff that we want. Or we had the option of, we could just put some almond milk in your coffee. It's not the same thing. And if you are a coffee drinker and you put almond milk in your coffee and you love it, that's fantastic. Keep doing it. If it's especially the unsweetened almond milk, all of that. But for most people, it just doesn't have that richness. It's that satisfying cup of coffee if you've become accustomed to putting a splash of real cream or real half and half in there. So I recently kind of scoped out the shelves and looked to see and I noticed, wow, there's actually a lot more lately new arrivals on shelves in the half and half coffee creamer department that nutritionally are also really good. And by really good, I mean they're unsweetened, they don't have sugar added. They also weren't just kind of a lot of flavors. There's people may like French vanilla or hazelnut creamer in their coffee, but typically, not talking plant-based foods, just typically if you're looking at a French vanilla creamer or a hazelnut creamer, for example, they're usually going to either be full of sugar or they're artificially sweetened. So if you've been dialing back artificial sweeteners and added sugars, chances are you haven't been doing a flavored creamer anyway. And so I really liked the fact that there was a lot of plant-based options for half and half creamers that were unflavored, just plain like half and half. And they also were unsweetened. They had no sugar, no added sugar. So there was 8 that I found on shelves, and I found them in stores. Whole Foods, let's just say it, has the biggest selection, but you can also find some of these that I'm talking about at regular mainstream grocery stores. Robert's, Fresh Market here in New Orleans, Walmart, Target has some of these that I'll be talking about as well. Each of the products too that we'll be talking about today, if you go to their website, and in the episode notes, I'll have the links to all these products to their website. You can go to their website and then click, they all have a store finder or, a way to find where in your area has them. So I'll mention some of where I've seen them in our New Orleans area, but beyond that, or if you don't go to the certain stores that I'm talking about, you can always go to these product websites and see where their store finders are. Also, most of these are also available online, Amazon, if you live in a place that doesn't have stores that you can buy these locally. So with coffee creamers, there is 8 that I found that kind of nutritionally fit the profile I was looking for. And I did a TV segment for WGNO on this topic. So it kind of justified me buying all 8, which normally we're not going to do that. You kind of just gamble, you buy one, you try it. So I got all 8 of them because I was featuring all 8 of them on a TV segment. And so then I knew nutritionally, they were all pretty even. So it wasn't like I'm ranking them best to worst in terms of nutrition, but I'm ranking them best to worst in terms of how similar are they to real half and half. So my top 3 that I wanted to share with y'all. One is Califia Farms. They have a product, they make almond milk, but they have a product called BetterHalf. And it's a coconut cream and almond milk blend. It's unsweetened. And the ingredients are really simple: almond milk, coconut cream. It does have 2 different types of gums, acacia gum and then the gellan gum, that help to keep it, that give it that thickness and help to keep it in suspension and from separating out. But the Califia Farms BetterHalf, and actually I'll say almost all except one of the 8 products that I found have the different types of gums in there to help it stay in suspension, to give it that thickness, to give it that texture. One of the ones that did not have the gums was bottom of the list on how it even tasted, period, much less putting it in your coffee. So that's something that I wouldn't let deter me personally from buying these. So, but it is something you'll see on the label. So I won't mention that for the others, but basically they all essentially have that. So Califia Farms BetterHalf, that was hands down is my favorite plant-based coffee creamer replacer. So what I did is we had regular half and half. Okay, tasted it. So we've got the flavor. Okay, here's what regular half and half tastes like. Just kind of like touch it to your tongue. Then tasted each of these other 8, kind of like rinsing in between and doing a full taste test. So it was a small little taste panel that I had, but I think a very particular when it comes to coffee creamers. So I think you can trust our judgment. But the Califia Farms one for flavor. 2 that were really close seconds to this. Picnic is the brand. It's PICNIK. They have something they call a collagen creamer. It is unsweetened. It's cashew milk, coconut cream, MCT oil. And then there's also a brand called Forager. They have a half and half unsweetened. It's again, cashew milk, coconut cream, dates, but really, really low sugar still. What I'll say is the Califia Farms BetterHalf, the Picnic collagen creamer, and then the Forager plant-based half and half. All 3 of these I really liked when I kind of just tasted a little sip of it, kind of touched my tongue, I was like, wow, that's really similar to this real cow's milk, half and half. When it came to how it behaved in my coffee, though, Califia Farms, hands down, I was like, wow, I really enjoy this. I enjoy it pretty much as I do a normal cup of coffee. The richness, the flavor, it didn't have any kind of wacky aftertaste. It still felt really full bodied in the cup of coffee. I didn't feel that way quite so much about the picnic or the forager. So just my own tips about how they actually work in the coffee. So tasting them just kind of on their own, the thickness, the richness, the flavor all seemed really great, but that Califia Farms like performs better in the cup of coffee. So coffee creamer can be kind of a deal breaker for people. Now, I'll also say another option that a lot of people do like or can kind of get accustomed to is just whisking. And for what we're about to say, you would actually want to use a small little battery operated whisk and use coconut oil in your coffee. And that kind of froths it. It gives it a little bit of a creaminess. So there's a version of bulletproof coffee, but that's got a lot of butter, a lot of different oils. There's certain types of specific oils, MCT oil, but also coconut oil is one variation of it. But usually those recipes for traditional bulletproof coffee call for 4 tablespoons. That's a lot. It can cause stomach upset for people. And the reality is you don't really need that much to kind of froth up and give that richness or creaminess to your coffee. So even if it was a teaspoon or 2 versus 4 tablespoons of coconut oil, you have a little battery operated whisk, you can do that. And again, I don't think the flavor is nearly like the half and halves that we were just talking about, but it is still plant-based. It still gives that flavor, that texture. People also use it who are doing like intermittent fasting, but they still want some calories in that fasting window. They don't want to go no calories. Adding something like the fats from coconut oil still technically has our body in that quote fasting state, but giving you the calories and giving you those plant-based calories. So coffee, those are the options that I would say win out for those who are looking for a coffee creamer or half and half option. Also, one thing that I forgot to mention, typical half and half for 2 tablespoons is about 40 calories. With these plant-based half and halves that I'm talking about, most of them are about 15 to 20 calories for 2 tablespoons. So about half the calories. They're all very low in carbs. For 2 tablespoons, there's 0 carbs or less than 1 carb. And like I said, 0 sugar. And mostly just a gram or 2 of fat is in them, kind of making it up. And as you heard me say, the ingredients, most of them are from coconut cream. So moving on to butter. Butter is one that can just be a real challenge for people who just like really love the flavor. I do a weekly or a monthly, actually, Ben of McLaughlin of Swerve. He's the sales director of Swerve, and he's a fantastic baker. So he joins me once a month on the segment that I was talking about that I do on WGNO. So it's a weekly TV segment, and Ben is with me once a month doing a different recipe. Ben is what he refers to. He's a self-proclaimed Paula Deen style baker that has evolved into a much healthier approach. So he initially grew up baking with butter, sugar, white flour. He and I actually did an entire podcast. If you are into baking and you haven't heard the podcast with him yet, it's like one of the first, maybe it's the 3rd or 4th or 5th podcast I ever did. Like, so scroll way back in the library. But it's he's a blast to listen to. So anyway, Ben, when we're doing these recipes and he's taken whatever the recipe is and he's, making it healthier, he'll cut out the sugar. He'll use Swerve, of course, instead. But instead of white flour, he'll use almond flour, coconut flour, whatever, kind of the occasion calls for. But he still loves his butter in spite of this and with these ingredients. So then I'm always like, when we're doing recipes, we'll present it as, well, you can make it with butter or you can make it with coconut oil, because you can use coconut oil cup for cup in place of butter. But here's the thing. He's like, but Molly, there's certain things that just have that butter flavor and I'm not getting it with coconut oil. Like, yes, it bakes like butter. You can use it for it gives the body, it gives the hold and the firmness in a baked good that butter does. It's not like you're just using oil, because it is that solid at room temp. So you can substitute coconut oil for butter, cup for cup when you're baking. You can use it in cooking. You can spread it onto your toast. So pretty much everywhere that you would use butter, you can use coconut oil. But the reason I brought up Ben is that, to his point, to many others' point, but I really miss that butter flavor. So there's a brand of coconut oil called Nutiva. They have a whole bunch of different really great products. They're an organic line. They have just phenomenal products, but they have different versions of coconut oil. And one of them is Nutiva's Organic Coconut Oil with butter flavor. And you would be like, well, that seems like if it's butter flavored coconut oil, what kind of wacky stuff are they putting in there? But it's organic, it's vegan, it's non-GMO. And the ingredients are really simple. So they're using organic coconut oil, and then they're using a vegan buttery flavor that's actually made from pure non-GMO fermented plants, including things like sunflower, coconut, and mint. So they're fermenting these, and this is what's giving that buttery flavor to the coconut oil. And then they use annatto for coloring. So this is like the compromise coconut oil, but it's not even a compromise. Nutritionally, it's just as has all the different benefits, all the different properties of coconut oil. But for those who are really struggling with giving up that butter flavor, this can be a fantastic option. Now I've seen it online for sure from their website or Amazon, of course, everything, but is on Amazon. But the only store I've seen it in is Walmart. And it's really reasonably priced. I didn't have it in my notes, but I want to say it's like maybe a 20 ounce or even 21 ounce jar of it. It's pretty big for just over like $8, either $7.98 or $8 and some change. So really reasonable price point. So again, in stores, I've only seen it at Walmart, or you can get it online. But Nutiva coconut oil with butter flavored is a solid option there. I want to take a minute to talk about Aslo, sponsor of this week's podcast episode. So when you're a small business, every minute matters and every dollar counts. So if you're spending too much of either of these, time and fees, then check out Aslo, a convenient and affordable solution for business banking. Aslo is a free business checking account with invoicing, bill pay, money transfers, no minimum balance, and no fees. And instead of the days or weeks that it takes to apply for an account at a traditional bank, with Aslo, you just go to azlo.com and apply in as little as 10 minutes. I also like that there's no waiting to use your account. You can deposit up to $1,000 and access it in your account instantly. Aslo is owned by BBVA USA, member FDIC, and because they make banking easy and they offer a fee-free checking account, Money Magazine called them the best business banking option for freelancers and entrepreneurs. So sign up right now, no minimum deposit, at aslo.com/fueled and get a free copy of Aslo's Small Business Starter Guide. That's spelled azlo.com/fueled, and sign up with a free small business starter guide and no minimum deposit. That's aslo.com/fueled. All right. So cheese is a struggle to find a plant-based option. I'll say this: if you love good Parmigiano Reggiano or some of just your really good rich cheeses, it's really almost impossible to find something at a regular grocery store that's going to compare that is a plant-based option. I have a lot of vegan friends, clients who would say, they would say otherwise. They say, no, I found these cheeses. They're really, really good. I think if you haven't had the real thing in a bit, it's like, yeah, that's pretty close to it. But if you have them side by side, there's definitely a difference. So I've really personally struggled finding whether it's a sliced cheese, block cheese, or shredded cheese that is plant-based or vegan that I've really liked. And also I've struggled finding them that I also really like the taste and the nutrition, because some of them have a lot of carbs, or they have just a lot of different kind of oils added to it. And when you look at the ingredients, you're like, there's been some that have maybe tasted okay, but then when you look at the ingredients, it's like, do I really want this? It might be plant-based or vegan, but it's not really what we would call it nutritious, So with cheese, there's so many other things that we get from cheese. We get calcium, we get protein. So kind of keeping that in mind. So when I look at, okay, well, what are some options? I do like spreadable cheeses. I do find that the plant-based cheese options or vegan cheese options that are spreadable, kind of like a Boursin style cheese, these I find are done really well. There's a brand called Miyoko. It's Miyoko's Creamery, and they have a vegan cheese. They use ingredients like cashews, miso, nutritional yeast, and then live active cultures. The taste and texture is really more cheese-like than other store-bought vegan cheeses that I've tried. And I also like that it still gives us like 5 grams of fiber per serving. Again, I'll be linking to these, but Miyoko's is one that I found, and I found that mostly at natural food type stores. Nutritional yeast is something to try. We've talked about this briefly on this podcast before, but it's a yellowish flake. Sometimes it's a powder, and it has a nutty, cheesy flavor. So you can almost think of it as like a grated Parmesan alternative. Now, again, if you're doing traditional like Parmigiano Reggiano that you're grating yourself, it's not like that. I would compare it more to the stuff in like the Kraft can with like the green cap for like what you're going to be like, okay, this is what I'm adding into my dish, into my food. But it still gives this nutty, cheesy flavor. And what I would say, the great thing about it is it is packed with vitamin B12. And that's typically something that's found more in animal products. So vegan products that are loaded with B12 aren't really super common. 2 tablespoons of the nutritional yeast has about 25 calories, 2-3 grams of protein, and more than a day and a half's worth of vitamin B12. So you can use it, you can sprinkle it over foods like vegetables or popcorn or whole grain toast. You can add it to dips, and it kind of has that like umami effect that it adds to it. You can put it into salad dressings. You can cook it down in sauces. We've made like vegan queso, and using something like the nutritional yeast just enhances it. And I kind of mentioned like the Kraft can earlier. It tastes a lot better than the Kraft Parmesan in the can with a green lid. It's a lot better than that. So I don't want to knock it. However, I would say if you are kind of a Parmigiano Reggiano connoisseur and you're grating it and that's what you're used to, it's not the same, but it can be a decent substitute, and it gives us a ton of nutritional benefit. That's something that you can find in many stores. Look for it. Sometimes different stores have kind of their healthy organic-y section. Sometimes it's like near their baking items. It can be in their bulk bin areas. So it can be in kind of any type of different place in stores. In Whole Foods, for example, they'll have it in the bulk bin section. They have it also in the supplement section. So it can be anywhere. So ask your store if they have it. And most stores will have it, or you can, again, it's very light in weight. So if you were going to order it online, it's not like you're going to pay a bunch for shipping for liquids and stuff like that. So we've talked half and half for our coffee. We've talked butter. We've talked cheese. Yogurt is another one. So if you're doing your Greek yogurt, your Fage 2%, I love that. And I would say personally, unless you're trying to really, really cut back on animal fats or animal products for whatever reason, just keep rolling with it. It's such a nutrient dense product. However, this whole topic is about my favorite plant-based alternatives. So the favorite one that I found as a instead of for regular Greek yogurt is an almond milk yogurt. The but here is that most of them are loaded with sugar, like 17 grams of added sugar in a small little carton of most almond milk type yogurts or many almond milk type yogurts. So you'll see the brand Kite Hill. They have a lot that have a lot of sugar added, but the Kite Hill almond milk yogurt that specifies no sugar added is fantastic. The protein is good. It's got no sugar added. They have a plain and they have a vanilla flavor. So hands down, that's my top choice for plant-based yogurts that are also all natural and really low in sugar. When it comes to milk, if you're doing regular cow's milk, you're getting protein with that. You're getting vitamin D, you're getting calcium. Making the switch to almond milk or coconut milk, you're not getting the protein for the most part. So they'll have 0 protein, 1, maybe 2 at the most. Orgain does make a 10 times protein almond milk that has 10 grams of protein in it. And so that would be a decent option. And most of the almond milk and coconut milks, not all, but most, are fortified with extra calcium and D. When it comes to plant-based milks, though, my top pick is the pea protein milks. And so it's Ripple is the most common that you'll see in stores. Target has it, Super Target. Walmart typically does. Regular groceries have it. I've seen it at, again, Robert, Fresh Market. But I like Ripple. It's protein from peas that is used to make, that's used for, that's the protein source in the milk. But a cup of it, it's just 80 calories, kind of like skim milk is. It's 8 grams of protein, just like regular skim milk. And then again, it's got our, the equivalent amount of calcium and D that we would get in regular milk too. So while unsweetened almond or coconut milk are fine, and I like them, they're low calorie, they're low carb, all that stuff. They don't really have the protein. So if you're looking for that protein source, then try to find one that's a pea protein milk. And Ripple is the most common one that I've seen on shelves. Creamy dips is another. Of course, most creamy dips are made with sour cream or mayonnaise or things that have some type of animal fat in there or animal ingredient. So I've talked about bitchin' sauce before on this podcast. I can't even say it. That's my favorite. I can't say it enough, I should say. That's my favorite plant-based dip. It is gluten-free, it's raw, it's vegan, but it's so rich and like flavorful, like you wouldn't know it's any of those things. It's made with almonds. It's made with some of that nutritional yeast we were talking about, Bragg's liquid aminos. Costco even has bitchin' sauce now. So if you're like, I don't usually get to Whole Foods, I know that's where they have the better selection. Costco has it. So if you're a Costco shopper, look for it there. Other dips that I love that are really easy to incorporate, still having that creamy dip, that creamy feel in a plant-based or vegan diet, baba ganoush. So easy there. Hummus, of course, we always think about hummus, but what I really like, because hummus is just chickpeas and chickpeas are fine, but we can really up the nutritional benefits if we go halvesies. So half regular chickpea hummus, or you could even do it with white beans, and then half some other type of vegetable that's blended, carrots, beets, edamame. The cool thing too is not only are you getting all the nutrients that those vegetables have, you're getting all the fiber they have. They'll actually drop the calorie content of that hummus because they're just lower than what the chickpeas or white beans would be. But it also makes a really cool color and it gets more vivid the more you add. So I love carrot, beet, and edamame hummus as kind of a twist on traditional hummus and also a way to slip in more vegetables. And then there's also a lot of stores are starting to have more of a selection, but vegan queso, so plant-based queso. And they do a good job on the marketing of it. A lot of them, you don't even really realize that it's plant-based at first until you start to take a closer look and you see, oh, like this is made with things like cashews. And again, that nutritional yeast, which is kind of adds that cheesiness. So there's a lot of options for dips that you don't have to just go salsa or guacamole when you're looking for that plant-based. There's a lot of ways to have things that feel like they're rich and creamy, but don't have that typical sour cream or mayonnaise. And then when we're talking about what to dip in it, I gave a little bit of this example last week, but veggie chips, many of them are not good. They're potato starch, rice flour, corn flour. So if we are talking about those creamy dips and we want stuff to dip in there, first of all, just go with vegetables for dipping if you can. I love jicama. You can buy jicama sticks already kind of sliced for us. I love red and yellow peppers. Just slice them yourself into little strips and use that as a chip. Carrots, baby carrots or whole carrots sliced into little discs. Endive, I like that to kind of scoop it up. Or if you've got vegetables that you're grilling, grilled eggplant, zucchini, squash, cut it a little thicker, grill some extra and use that for dipping. And having that grilled zucchini or squash or eggplant and using that to dip is just, I think, delicious. For a chip, I talked about this last week, but it's worth mentioning again. Rhythm Superfoods is a really good chip. And I go back to Costco. They have this at Costco as well, but also a bunch of different grocery stores carry this. But they have chips that are entirely just beets or carrots or kale or cauliflower. and they're basically just dried, but they're really crispy. They're actually flavorful. A bag will be like $3.99, so not crazy cost prohibitive there. So that's my top rec for chips. Pasta. We've talked, of course, about spiralized carrots, butternut squash, beet, zucchini, spiralized regular squash. All of those are fantastic. If you haven't tried palmini linguine yet, though, try it. So it's basically hearts of palm pasta. So it's pasta made from the hearts of palm, and it's really neutral in flavor. You don't have to cook it. You would take it out of the package, rinse it, and then let's just say you're cooking down whatever sauce it is. You would just toss this hearts of palm pasta through it, and it naturally softens. It almost sort of like, quote, cooks as you add it into whatever that sauce is. You could have it just like raw too. We've actually used it as like a lettuce replacer in salads. You can do this. But the hearts of palm, quote, pasta, Palmini is one brand. Whole Foods has the store brand also. And those are two brands that I've seen of it so far. I'm sure more will come out, but the Palmini, I've seen it in different stores, and I tried it as like I bought it, I should say. I bought it and I was like, I'm going to try this. It's something new. I haven't tried it before. But it kind of sat in the pantry for a while because I was like, yeah, it says it's like regular pasta, but I don't think that Brad's going to like this for dinner. It's just probably not going to fly. And so I might have had it in there a month or longer. And then a friend of mine was over here and she was raving about it. And she's really particular and she really loves pasta. And so I was like, wait, I've got this. And so anyway, we tried it. She's right. It's really good for a pasta replacer. Also, the thing that's really cool is it takes 0 time. So if you're pressed for time and you're watching carbs, calories, etc., the palmini pasta, the hearts of palm pasta, is a really great option, in addition to all the spiralized veggies, of course, that we have come to expect for that. And then, of course, let's talk about beans and veggies because we're talking about plant-based diet. One of the things that is just such a quick fix, and if you aren't from New Orleans, you may not be as familiar with it, or from Louisiana, but Blue Runner red beans has a Creole cream style. So they're almost already creamy. It's as if someone already made these beans and put them into a can, like made them, cooked them down. So it's not just the red beans. They're really cooked and kind of in that soupy sauce. But the Blue Runner red beans, Creole cream style, they have a no salt added variety. That allows you to control what you put in it. If you put a splash of Tabasco, if you put just a pinch of salt in there, it allows you to kind of control how much salt you have. But the thing about beans, and red beans in particular, they're actually one of the higher antioxidant vegetables out there. And so we don't think about red beans as like a superfood necessarily, but they are. So antioxidants, different than what we're going to get from our leafy greens or our beets. So again, color represents all the different nutrients. These red beans are giving us different nutrients than our carrots or our greens or our beets are. And of course, beans are loaded with protein. They're loaded with fiber. I talked a little bit last week about how something like quinoa is kind of hyped up as a real great, meat alternative, that it's high protein and fiber. But red beans, or really beans of any type, totally blows it out of the water. And then still talking about kind of like protein replacers, or meat replacers, I should say, using eggplant and mushrooms in place of meat, or even just in place of half of the meat in a recipe, can work. So there's a lot of course, products on the market that are meat replacers that are veggie based. So veggie crumbles, tofu crumbles, different ways that, it's usually in the freezer section or the produce section, and it's, quote, meat replacers that you would add instead of meat, which those are still fine. We can do those, but we can also use mushrooms and eggplant because the mushrooms have a really good kind of meat-like texture. Eggplant can be pureed and then added to a dish for creaminess, or you can grill cubes of eggplant that can be used in place of meat. So adding these both at the end, mushrooms or eggplant, putting them towards the end though, so they don't cook down to just mush. But remember though, if you have a dish and it has meat in it and you're replacing it with just mushrooms and eggplant, then you're not really getting the protein you need there. So you may choose to either have half the amount of beef or turkey or whatever, and then half eggplant and mushrooms instead. Or if you wanted to go all the way plant-based, you could use something like There's Impossible Burger, and then there's Beyond Burger. Impossible is not as easy to find in stores. It's really limited in distribution in grocery stores, but Beyond Beef is much easier to find in stores. So you may say, okay, well, I'll do whatever the recipe calls for in terms of meat. Maybe you do half of that with Beyond Beef. So you're going to get the protein. You get that kind of beef-like texture. And then you'll do half of that with mushrooms and eggplant. So there's different ways. And I would say for what we're thinking about here is stuff like chili, meat sauce, stuff in tacos, or if you were doing, like we have an Eat Fit enchilada we just worked on with our cafe, Fuel Cafe over at Oshner Fitness Center. And the inside of that is we actually use Impossible there, but with a whole bunch of different vegetables diced up into it. We're doing a bolognese there with the Impossible Burger, and then cubes of eggplant, which just gives like a really fantastic texture. So again, just thinking of, okay, or if you say, I don't want to use the Impossible or the Beyond, you can still use your regular meat if it's, if that works with what you're doing nutritionally, but maybe just use half of it. So that is kind of a roundup of 10, I hope, relatively easy ways for you to start to make the transition, replacing these animal-based foods that typically fill our diet with more plant-forward ingredients. Again, this is the tip of the iceberg. These are just some of the current things that I am using now, the ways that I'm incorporating things into my diet that I wanted to share with you guys. I hope that these are helpful for y'all, and I know there's so much more that you're doing. So always share that with me. And there's some things that maybe you're doing that you think are super easy and your friends are like, oh my gosh, that's such a hassle. Or stuff that when you share it with them, they're like, wow, this is easy and it tastes really delicious. And all of that, any and all works. Because if it's worth it to us to put the effort into it and we like it, that's all that matters. So as always, I'll include the links that I mentioned in the show notes of this episode, and let me know what you think as you incorporate some or more of these strategies. Talk to me about it. I am registered dietitian Molly Kimball, and you've been listening to Fueled Wellness and Nutrition, the podcast. If you would like more Fueled Wellness and Nutrition, please head over to mollykimball.com, and you can follow me, Molly Kimball RD, on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And if you haven't yet, please go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. And join us next week for another dose of Fueled Wellness and Nutrition. Thanks for listening, and stay focused on living your strongest, healthiest life.